Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. We're going to be digging into a topic that's been in the news a lot lately.
Yeah,
Climate overshoot.
definitely a hot topic, if you'll pardon the pun.
Well, we're all about tackling the tough stuff here, so let's jump right in. We've got this new paper from Nature,
Yeah.
and let me tell you, it doesn't pull any punches.
No, it really doesn't. It cuts right to the chase and lays out the stakes.
And those stakes are high. We're talking about what happens if we miss those key climate targets, those ones we always hear about.
Right, like the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit.
Exactly. This paper dives into what a post-overshoot world might actually look like.
And it's not just a simple case of, oh, temperatures went up a bit too high, but now they're back down, so we're good.
Right. It's not like turning the EC on and off.
Not at all. This paper digs into the complexities, the potential long-term impacts, even if we manage to bring temperatures back down later.
So overshoot, for those just joining the conversation, it doesn't just mean temperatures going up. It means they might come back down, but is that even a good thing? What are we left with?
Exactly. That's the million-dollar question this paper tries to address.
And they talk about different pathways, different scenarios, like limited overshoot. Is that what they call it?
Yeah, limited overshoot, it's where we might exceed that 1.5 degree limit, but just by a tiny amount and for a short time, hopefully,
So like a little blip on the radar at Ely.
in theory, but even a blip can have consequences.
Right. And they talk about enhanced protection pathways too, right?
Yes, these are pathways specifically designed to minimize those temperature spikes, to keep us as far from the edge as possible.
So different approaches, but with that same goal, minimize the damage.
Exactly.
But even with these limited scenarios, this paper says there are still consequences.
Oh, absolutely. There are no easy answers here.
And one of the big things they emphasize is the role of carbon dioxide removal.
CDR.
Yeah, CDR, taking that CO2 right out of the atmosphere. What's the takeaway there?
This paper really highlights how crucial carbon removal could become in a post-overshoot world.
Crucial how? Like, how much are we even talking about?
We're talking potentially hundreds of gigatons of carbon dioxide that we might need to remove.
Hundreds of gigatons. For our listeners, that's an insane amount. Like, imagine trying to suck up all the CO2 we've been pumping out for decades, maybe even a century. It's mind-boggling.
It really is. And the paper dives into the sheer scale of that challenge, especially given where our technology is right now.
Right. It's like, even if we had the tech, which we're still working on, wouldn't pulling that off be, I don't know, ridiculously difficult?
It would be a monumental undertaking, to say the least. And this paper doesn't shy away from the potential limitations.
Limitations like what? Give us the rundown.
Well, you got the technology itself, which is still developing. Then there's the cost of such a massive operation. Who's going to pay for all that?
Right, who foots the bill?
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of public acceptance. Will people even get on board with such a massive technological intervention?
It feels like a gamble, doesn't it? Like, are we putting all our eggs in the carbon removal basket?
That's a concern the paper raises as well. They talk about this idea of preventive CDR capacity.
Prevented CDR capacity. Break that down for us.
It's like an insurance policy for the planet, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
They argue that we need to be ready to remove carbon dioxide even if we don't overshoot.
So even if we stay below that 1.5 degree target.
Yes, it's about being prepared for the unknowns, just in case things don't go as planned.
Okay, so like, I'm a cautious cook, but I still have a fire extinguisher just in case.
Exactly. Because we can't predict everything. And this paper suggests that having that backup plan, that preventative capacity, is essential.
Because we can't rely solely on just cutting emissions, right?
Exactly.
That makes sense. But here's what really got me thinking. This paper emphasizes that overshoot isn't just about a number on a thermometer, you know?
It's about so much more than just that one number.
Even if we magically brought the global temperature back down, some changes might be irreversible.
You're hitting on a crucial point there. We're not dealing with a simple system. The planet doesn't just bounce back.
Right, it's not like turning the oven down after you've overcooked something.
Not at all. The paper gives the example of sea level rise. Every 100 years we spend above that 1.5 degree mark could mean an extra 40 centimeters of sea level rise by 2300.
Whoa, 40 centimeters? That's like, what, over a foot of sea level rise?
Yeah, and that's even if we manage to reverse the warming later on. We could be locking in changes that reshape coastlines for centuries.
And displace entire communities.
Absolutely. And it's not just the oceans, right? We've talked before about permafrost.
Right, that ticking time bomb in the Arctic.
Exactly. Permafrost thawing could release even more greenhouse gases, creating this awful feedback loop.
Where warming leads to more warming, which leads to even more warming.
Precisely. The impacts of overshoot are far-reaching, and in some cases, potentially irreversible.
Sobering stuff.
It is, and it forces us to think differently about what it means to adapt, to prepare for a future where overshoot is a very real possibility.
Because when we talk about adapting to climate change, we often frame it as minimizing the worst impacts.
Right, minimizing the damage.
But what if some of that damage is already baked in, even if we get those temperatures under control later? What does that mean for the choices we're making today about how we build our cities, how we live our lives?
You're getting at the heart of the issue. It's not just a scientific question, it's deeply social and ethical.
It's about values, about justice, about who gets to decide and who bears the burden.
And this paper doesn't shy away from those tough questions.
It seems like we're talking about a fundamental shift in how we think about climate action.
I think we are. It's not just about preventing the worst-case scenario anymore. It's about navigating a whole spectrum of possibilities and making really difficult choices.
Choices with consequences that will echo for generations.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, that's for sure. But this paper, it's not just about doom and gloom. It also talks about solutions, right? Or at least ways forward, given what we know.
Yeah, it definitely lays out some potential strategies, some things we need to be thinking about, and some areas where we need to step up our game, big time.
So if we're looking at a future where overshoot is a real possibility, but we're also not just going to roll over, what does a responsible path forward even look like?
Well, one thing this paper really drives home is that we can't treat overshoot like some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, oh, it's okay if we go a bit above 1.5 degrees, we'll just invent our way out of it later. It's a risky gamble, to say the least.
Right, because some of those impacts, those changes we talked about, they're not so easily reversible. It's like crashing your car and being like, don't worry, I'm pretty good with duct tape. Some damage is just, well, permanent.
Exactly. And this paper, it really emphasizes that need to shift away from overshoot as an option, you know? We should be focusing on minimizing climate risk, both now and in the long run.
So less about slamming on the brakes after we've already gone over the cliff and more about staying far, far away from the edge in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And a big part of that is, well, there's no way around it. We have to accelerate emissions reductions, like yesterday. Those enhanced protection pathways we talked about, the ones that limit that peak warming. That's where our actions right now really make a difference.
Like hitting the brakes now, even if it's a little jerky, is better than a major crash later on.
Precisely. But it's not just about hitting the brakes. We also need to, I guess you could say, upgrade the car.
Okay, I like that analogy. What are we upgrading? Are we talking about those technological solutions we discussed earlier? Like carbon removal and stuff?
Exactly. This paper, it argues that while cutting emissions is absolutely crucial, we also need to get serious about developing and scaling up things like carbon removal technologies. And this is but it's not about replacing those emissions cuts. It's about having both.
So it's not like carbon removal is this magic eraser we can use to clean up our mess after the fact. It's more like a tool in the toolbox, right? Something that can help us stay on a safer path overall.
Exactly. It's about building resilience, being prepared for those scenarios where things might get a little hairy, even with our best efforts.
It's that preventive CDR capacity you mentioned earlier.
Yes. Exactly. Like, we're not planning on needing that fire extinguisher, but we sure are glad we have it, just in case.
Right. Always better to be prepared. And speaking of being prepared, this paper doesn't sugarcoat the scale of what we might be dealing with. They talk about potentially removing hundreds of gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. I mean, come on, that number is just stuck in my head now.
It's almost impossible to fathom, right? Hundreds of gigatons. To put that in perspective, imagine trying to suck up all the emissions from like every car, every plane, every factory for decades. It's mind-boggling.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, like, even if we figure out the whole how to remove that much carbon thing, aren't there still massive questions about, well, everything else, like the energy needed, the resources, even the potential environmental impacts of those removal processes?
Oh, absolutely. This paper acknowledges that there are still huge, unanswered questions about the feasibility and the sustainability of carbon removal at that scale.
It's not just as simple as flipping a switch, right? We're talking about massive undertakings with a whole bunch of potential consequences we haven't even begun to fully understand.
Right. And even if we could wave a magic wand and make all those technical challenges disappear, we'd still be left with, let's be honest, the even bigger hurdle.
Which is?
The human side of things, the social and political dimensions. Because even if we could remove gigatons of CO2, who gets to decide how we do it? Who pays for it? who benefits and who might bear the brunt of any unintended consequences.
It's like those questions of justice and equity we talked about. They don't magically get easier just because we figured out the engineering, do they? If
Hmm.
anything, they become even more crucial to address.
You got it. This paper, it really underscores that this isn't just a scientific challenge or a technological one. It's deeply, fundamentally social and political. It's about people.
It's about us and how we choose to move forward together, even with all the uncertainty and complexity.
And that's something this paper really made me think about. It's not just about the science anymore. It's about how we govern ourselves, how we share resources, how we ensure that the solutions we come up with are actually just and equitable.
It's a much bigger conversation than just emissions and temperatures, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about values, it's about ethics, it's about what kind of future we want to create.
It's a lot to process, no doubt about it. We've covered some really big, really complex issues today, massive technological undertakings, ethical dilemmas, a whole new way of thinking about how we approach this whole climate challenge. So where do we even go from here? If we accept that overshoot is a real possibility, but we're also not ready to just throw our hands up in defeat, what does a responsible, I don't know, what does a responsible path forward even look like at this point?
Yeah, it's a big question. And I think this paper, it does a good job of laying out those big picture responses, those things we need to tackle on a global scale, like those enhanced protection pathways and really getting serious about carbon removal tech.
Mm.
But, one thing I found interesting, and maybe it's just me, but it felt like the paper was also pointing to something else, kind of indirectly, almost like a subtle undercurrent,
Oh, like what?
like the importance of those smaller scale actions, the things that don't always grab the headlines. You know what I mean?
Like what kinds of things? Give us some examples.
Well, things like community-based adaptation projects, for example, or
Mhm.
changing building codes to make our infrastructure more resilient, more able to withstand the changes that are already happening.
Right, right. Thinking about those more localized solutions.
Exactly. Or even just individuals, making more sustainable choices in their own lives. It all adds up.
It's that think globally, act locally idea, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because as important as those global efforts are, there's still so much we can do, each of us in our own communities,
Yeah.
to reduce our impact, to build resilience, to create a future that's, well, just better.
Absolutely. But I think it's easy to get overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the problem, you know? Like, does my little bit of recycling even matter when we're talking about gigatons of CO2? Does
Yep.
it really make a difference?
I hear you. It's a really common feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to remember that even if we achieve that 1.5-degree goal, which would be amazing, don't get me wrong, it's still a world that demands adaptation. We're going to have to live with some level of climate change no matter what. And that means being prepared.
And not just prepared as a planet, as some kind of abstract global community.
Exactly. Prepared in our own backyards, in our own communities, in our own lives.
It's not like there's going to be this finish line we cross where we all get to say, "Whew, okay, we solved climate change."
It's ongoing, right?
Yes.
It's a process.
Yeah.
It requires us to keep learning, keep adapting, keep working together. Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about recognizing that this is the new reality and figuring out how to not just survive, but thrive in that reality.
And to thrive in a way that's just and equitable, that doesn't leave anyone behind.
100%.
Uh,
And that requires, I think, a pretty fundamental shift in our mindset, both individually and as a society.
it's about recognizing that we're not powerless in all of this, that our
Mhm.
choices matter, that we have agency, and that we're in this together.
Exactly. We're all in this together.
So for anyone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed right now, and believe me, I get it, it's heavy stuff, where do we even start? What's that first step, that first little nudge in the right direction?
Sometimes when I'm feeling lost, I just remind myself that there's some seriously brilliant, dedicated people out there working on this all over the world.
Right, like it's not just us.
Not at all. There are scientists and engineers pushing the boundaries of what's possible, coming up with new technologies, new solutions. There are policymakers trying to figure out how to create systemic change, how to shift our whole approach. And then there are activists and communities on the ground demanding action, pushing for a just transition. We don't have to have all the answers ourselves. We just need to find ways to plug in, to get involved, to support the incredible work that's already happening.
It's about finding those points of leverage, right? Where can our individual actions, our skills, our passions actually make a difference?
Exactly. And that might be in our own homes, in our communities, in our workplaces. It might be supporting organizations that are doing great work. It might be having those tough conversations with friends and family who are still on the fence about all of this. But every little bit counts. Every action, every conversation, it all contributes to that larger movement for change.
It's about building a better future together.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you, as always, for lending your expertise to this really crucial, albeit pretty intense topic.
My pleasure, honestly. These conversations are so important.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.